In a world filled with options, no choice is as crucial as selecting the right primary care doctor. Arch Health and Graybill have joined Palomar Health to create Palomar Health Medical Group, a harmonious blend of medical expertise and family values. Our promise is to create an experience of warmth and compassion, transforming fear into trust. This open enrollment, the right decision is an easy one. Choose a primary care physician that puts your and your family's health first. Choose Palomar Health Medical Group.
All right, final week of the regular season high school football in San Diego County. Jon Schaeffer and Jonathan Rifkin back with you. It is Left Coast Sports presented by Palomar Health. We're going to look back at this past week, including a couple of games on YurView. We'll look ahead to our YurView game of the week on Game Time as well. And we remind you, this episode is brought to you by Palomar Health. Champions aren't made overnight. They're created through practice, determination, and dedication. Palomar Health, champions of healthcare. Champions for you. So we had a couple of games this past week, Jonathan, we can get into. You were on the call for one of them. I was on the call for the other. Let's start with the game you were on the call for on Thursday night. El Camino and Mission Hills, a top 10 Mission Hills team, winning 21-7. What did you see this past Thursday night?
Yeah, this was a very persistent Mission Hills team. Both these teams, John, vying for a bye in the Division I postseason with the way that things are shaping up right now. And I think El Camino came out of the gates feeling like it had the momentum. Its offense was moving the ball better. Its defense was pressuring Troy Hun, the Mission Hills sophomore quarterback. However, they fumbled the ball on the 1 yard line after a 90-some yard drive. And that changed the entire momentum of the game because flags started to accrue. There was another fumble on a really good kickoff return or punt return for El Camino. And Mission Hills at first really wasn't capitalizing. But over time, they realized that if they stopped throwing the ball, they only had 6 completions from the quarterback, Troy Hun, and they utilized Giovanni Hart, one of the better running backs here in San Diego, who ran for three touchdowns and over 100 yards. Then they would find some success, especially with the way that their defense was playing and the mistakes that El Camino was making. So it turned out that El Camino, they look in the mirror and you could say that they beat themselves, but there's a lot of credit that goes to Mission Hills for adjusting and making El Camino pay for some of the mistakes that they made, which is what led them to that 21-7 victory.
All right, so we had that on Thursday. Then Friday, we had St. Augustine and Madison. I was on the call with Jack Cronin. And St. Augustine just too much, really, for Madison. You had Isaiah Haston, who was huge, both offensively and defensively, had a really big interception in this game, had 5 catches for 149 yards. St. Augustine all of a sudden is over 500, by the way, overall at 5-4. I was impressed by Brady Palmer, both his arm and his ability to run the football. He was 12 of 18, threw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Brown had a touchdown for Madison in the loss. Madison now 0-3 in league, 3-6 overall. So again, St. Augustine over Madison on Friday night, 34-14. Now around the county, there was an absolute thriller between two of the best teams in the county, Granite Hills and Helix. Thrilling double overtime win for Granite Hills, 44-43. What are the implications of that outstanding game from this past weekend?
Yeah, so it seems like for the open division, John, Lincoln and Carlsbad have locked up the 1 and 2 positions. Prior to this game, the 3 and 4 spots were very much up for grabs. And it feels like the last few weeks we've been seeing that Carlsbad is a bit vulnerable defensively. So if you can maybe take advantage of a sane mistake or an empty drive, which happens very, very rarely, and your offense is rolling, then there's actually a way to beat Carlsbad. So both these teams probably prefer to play Carlsbad in the open division postseason than Lincoln. Granite Hills was 4, Helix was 3 in the Max Preps top 10. The top 4 teams get into the open division. And there were some questions about the strength of schedule for Granite Hills. They hadn't really played anybody up to Helix's type of potential coming into this weekend. But boy, in a double overtime win, they absolutely showed that they belong in the open division. They win 44-43 after Helix elects to go for a 2-point conversion after scoring a touchdown. They didn't get it, and Granite Hills walks away with a victory. Their ground game is absolutely stacked, John. Pablo Jackson ran for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. Max Turner, both juniors, by the way, ran for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. And they didn't turn over the ball. Zachary Benitez, only 12 completions and a touchdown, but no interceptions. So You combine that with some fortuitous 2-point conversion mishandling by Helix, and Granite Hills walks away with a victory that should secure them into the Open Division 3rd seed, which would match them up with Carlsbad in that first weekend. Lincoln would play Madison, and or Helix, excuse me, and for a Helix defense that is giving up quite a few points per game, that could be a tough game. Now, I would say that all teams are vulnerable in the Open Division, but Carlsbad seems to have a couple of more defensive holes to fill than Lincoln does.
All right, so that's on cue because Carlsbad, they won this past weekend over La Costa Canyon, but they did allow 34 points in the win. They won at 41-34. Julian Sane was terrific, 438 yards, 4 touchdowns. But is Carlsbad susceptible with this defense allowing 34 points to La Costa Canyon this past weekend?
Yeah, La Costa Canyon has a sophomore quarterback who's really, really dynamic. Their offensive line is a bit weak, but they have pieces all over the place. So I think that, but there's no more pieces at La Costa Canyon than you're not going to see, or than you're going to see at I guess Granite Hills is a good example where obviously Lincoln has the most pieces around, but even some of the Division I teams in the Avocado, Torrey Pines has figured out their situation offensively with the coaching change that happened to begin the season. So has Cathedral Catholic, so has St. Augustine. So you're seeing that teams that have dynamic offenses can contest Carlsbad. Jalen St. Paul, who's really, really dynamic wide receiver, 5 for 159, still just committed to San Diego State, a huge get for the Aztecs. If he decides to stick with that commitment, it's just a verbal right now, but things are pointing in that direction. So, you have him, you have Rosenblum, who's 5 for 128 this week. So you have 2 guys with 10 receptions for over 300 yards or close to 300 yards, and you still almost give up this game against the Costa Canyon. So again, unless Carlsbad can really shore up that defense, because it really is an offensive heavy team, there is a team out there that if they have the perfect offensive game or near perfect, they can lose. Because again, the Mavericks are really, really good, probably the 8th or 9th best team in San Diego. And their defenses should be better than what it performed in this game. But the offense probably 14 or 15 in San Diego, and they were able to put up 34 points and make this ball game. So it doesn't raise any flags for the Lancers, but just some questions.
All right, so let's look ahead. Final week of the regular season, right? We have Del Norte and San Marcos for you Thursday night. Game time on YurView, our game of the week. You've been calling Del Norte all year. I know they're coming off a big win over Ramona. We'll also preview St. Augustine and Cathedral Catholic, and then we just talked about Carlsbad. They'll get El Camino this weekend. But let's start with our game of the week. Del Norte is rolling. What's it going to take to beat San Marcos on Thursday night?
Yeah, San Marcos is trying to vie for one of those top 12 spots in Division One. Top 4 teams get a bye, which is a huge, huge deal. I don't think San Marcos will reach that type of opportunity, especially with 1 game left and Del Norte being a D2 team who has locked up the number 1 seed in Division Two. So they're sitting a bit more comfortably, but San Marcos, this game would secure their spot in Division One in the postseason. So it's interesting. Both these teams are 4-0 in conference in the Palomar League. So this is for the Palomar League title, a Palomar League that has proven from top to bottom it's one of the more competitive leagues. Not quite Avocado, maybe more like the city in terms of its quality and how the teams really are susceptible to beating up on each other, sort of like the Pac-12. Early on in the season, they lost their sophomore quarterback, Makahele. He was really highly touted. This is San Marcos we're talking about. 12 touchdowns, 1 interception in the first 4 games of the season. He passed for 720 yards, and then he goes down season-ending injury, and they bring in a junior, Bradley Jenkins. Bradley Jenkins has been really good, 55% completion percentage, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, still over 700 passing yards. He can run a little bit, but he's really stepped in nicely and filled the void that Makahele left going down for the season. And San Marcos, since then, they haven't lost a game. They've done really good work. They destroyed Rancho Bernardo last week. The week before that, they held Ramona scoreless. Ramona's first scoreless game since 2015 or 16 against Rancho Bernardo. So it was like 81 games. So the defense has come together for San Marcos. The offense under a backup quarterback has come together for San Marcos. So they have all their pieces set. And by the way, Jace Nix, one of the best wide receivers in the county, a junior who last week did a little bit of carrying the football, but he still has almost 700 yards in the receiving game and 11 touchdowns. So he's the main priority in that offense for the San Marcos Knights. Del Norte, best season the Nighthawks have ever had. They opened up the school in 2010, first varsity season with 2011. So in season number 13 for them, or season number 12, this is by far the best team that they've ever put out. Nick Barnett won the 2011 Super Bowl with the Packers. There was that big game about a month ago where he matched up with Eric Weddle and the Rancho Bernardo Broncos, and Del Norte beat Rancho Bernardo in quadruple overtime, probably the game of the year. And Eric Weddle ended up losing to one Super Bowl champion to another. We're not sure if that's ever happened in San Diego before, by the way. Legadu Nene, who was a 7-year wide receiver in the NFL, is the offensive coordinator at Del Norte. So they have a lot of NFL experience. They run it like an NFL program. And I mean, last week against Ramona, we're seeing hard counts by Jack Schneider to try and read the defense. And that allowed Ty Olson, after those reads, to get open for a 90-yard touchdown and a 73-yard touchdown. So this team offensively, really, really good. Defensively, they have two guys in their defensive line, Adrian Gonzalez and Khalid Farah, who will probably be playing on Saturdays. And the secondary is very weak. That's where they give up a ton of passing yards. They play behind the football, soft coverage in man, especially. They give up a lot long third downs. A couple of weeks ago against Mount Carmel, they converted 4 third and 10 or more yard downs in that game. So San Marcos' offense certainly has the capabilities of taking down the defense, but Del Norte's offense also has the capabilities of taking on the defense in San Marcos. So this game could be a toss-up and a really good way to end our season.
All right, so also this upcoming weekend, we mentioned St. Augustine, who we just saw on Friday night with that big win over Madison. Cathedral Catholic, a year ago, gets off to the slow start. This year, doesn't get off to the best of starts. This is shaping up to be a huge game, obviously. St. Augustine now over 500 taking on Cathedral Catholic. What are your expectations?
I'm expecting actually a decent amount of points in this game, especially from what we saw St. Augustine put up last week against Madison. Both these teams, you mentioned it, slow starts. I mean, St. Augustine was like 1-3 to start off this season. Cathedral Catholic, a much tougher schedule. They play some of the best teams in Nevada and Arizona, and up in, I believe they played Centennial High School, which is the 3rd or 4th open division team in the LA City section this year. So in that, or the Southern section this year, excuse me. So that really gives them some credibility despite a 3-6 record. And they run a really good offense, well coached. And I think if you're St. Augustine, Ron Gladnick has done a great job with the pieces that he's had, but they're so young. You saw that, John. You just have sophomores everywhere. And as the season progresses, great teams play their best football. But this is a game of experience. So I do think Cathedral, they're a little bit better, bigger defensively up front. I think they can give fits that young St. Augustine offensive line and quarterback. So it's going to be a really good game, but I do think Cathedral comes out of here with a victory.
All right. So again, Carlsbad trying to wrap up that number 2 seed essentially in the open division. They can't afford a loss. To El Camino, that's their regular season finale. Carlsbad, El Camino. You're expecting Carlsbad to finish off a perfect regular season?
I am expecting them to. We saw the offense last week for El Camino struggle against Mission Hills. I'm not exactly sure where Mission Hills defense stacks with the Lancers. But yeah, I think there was a trio of running backs that El Camino could have used. They only used 2 of them. Tua LA was the only running back, only player for El Camino to even score a touchdown. And the offensive line just wasn't great. And if Carlsbad can get to Carson Newman, their quarterback, a couple of times, he might have a rough night. So as much as I think that El Camino could, if they played their best football, win this game, I don't see Carlsbad faltering that much. Now, El Camino wins this game, and they're probably the 4th team in Division I, so they get a bye. So this is a huge game for them in terms of postseason implications. Having a bye automatically guarantees you a spot in the quarterfinal. And so it's a lot better to play 4 games or 3 games than to play 4, especially in a division where from 1 to 12, those teams are mostly pretty much even. Now, Ramona lost their star 2-way player in Jamil Kassab, and they lost on Friday against Del Norte. They lost Adrian Enriquez, their star running back. And so they're going to probably make the Division I postseason, but because they're shorthanded, I don't think they're going to be that competitive. But the rest of Division I should be pretty competitive, and having a bye in the first round is a huge, huge deal. So El Camino has an extra chip on their shoulder, knowing that that's a fact. Carlsbad doesn't really have as much to play for because they've locked up the Avocado League Championship and the number 2 seed in open division.
All right. So, yeah, we mentioned the open division where we think it is essentially set. Lincoln, Carlsbad, Helix, Granite Hills. We'll see on the order coming up next week. But the division one, like you just talked about, in terms of a postseason outlook, um, buys are critical, like you said, because you make your way all the way to the quarterfinal. 12 teams are going to be in. How is this shaping up with 1 week to go now in the regular season?
Yeah, so the section is going back to max preps for the first time in a couple of years, and it's there's conversations about, is there a better way? Max preps doesn't post their algorithm, like how they get the results that are you find on the website. So people are, obviously, transparency is something that I think people want. With that being said, they do explain that they rank strength of schedule utmost. So like you mentioned, the top four teams, Helix and Granite Hills, and then the number 1 and 2, Lincoln and Carlsbad, already out of the Division 1 to the open division. So that opens it up. Looks like Mission Hills is in play for the number 1 seed in Division 1. Right now, as we sit, it's Mission Hills, Torrey Pines Cathedral Catholic, and El Camino. Those would be the top 4 teams in Division 1, and they would get the buys that would be really beneficial in getting into the quarterfinal. Now, things can change because Torrey Pines and La Costa Canyon play. La Costa Canyon in the 9 seed, or they would be a 5th seed, so right outside on the outside looking into those buys in Division 1. If they end up losing to Torrey Pines, then they might drop a little bit further. I don't think Torrey Pines will get elevated to past Mission Hills because that win wouldn't be enough to push them above in strength of schedule. But if La Costa Canyon beats Torrey Pines, and Torrey Pines could drop down outside of those top 4 seeds, and they would lose their bye, or that could kick El Camino out because then La Costa Canyon could jump them, and now all of a sudden you have Torrey Pines and La Costa Canyon with Cathedral Catholic and Mission Hills. That's 3 avocado teams, pretty crazy. And El Camino would be on the outside looking in. So there's some circuitous implications on the games this week as it pertains to the Division 1 postseason.
Hard to believe it is the final week of the regular season, all types of implications across the county. And we'll have an update for you coming up next week as we get ready for the postseason. Again, join us Thursday night, Del Norte, San Marcos. You're on the call. Jack Cronin, right? You and Jack?
Me and Jack, yes.
All right. Jonathan Rifkin and Jack Cronin. Jonathan, as always, appreciate it. Good stuff. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks, John.
All right, this episode, again, brought to you by Palomar Health. Champions aren't made overnight. They're created through practice, determination, and dedication. Palomar Health, champions of healthcare, champions for you. Join us Thursday night for Del Norte and San Marcos at 7 p.m. Until next time, for Jonathan Rifkin, I'm Jon Schaeffer. You have been watching Left Coast Sports. Stay with us. Actually, don't stay with us, but thanks for watching.